Chapter 6. It had been a couple of months since the start of this mission and was the beginning of the third stop on this boring diplomatic tour. The day, or at least the 24 shipboard time, started so well. Our last stop had been, for lack of a better term, an agri-world. The agri-world only had about 100 million people but produced and packaged enough food every month to keep a steady stream of FTL ships coming and going, hauling food to distant planets, mostly the core worlds. This massive food trade made everyone on the planet filthy rich, which resulted in a planet covered in giant robo-farms and mansions that masqueraded as ranches. Of course, after assuring the farmers that we would see to their concerns on the core worlds, we loaded up on the best food they had available. Real steak and real eggs were hard to beat, so while I was enjoying my food, I ended up chatting with one of the ship's star knots. She was a shielder, meaning she had the power to create shields or amplify existing ones. Like other star knots, shielding was her only power. She was telling me about the star knot's ultimate weapon, a battleship with 60 star knots linked together capable of shoving a planet out of orbit. While the ship sounded super cool, we both agreed that it would probably be used to shove planets into the Goldilocks zone for terraforming, instead of ever being used as a warship. I had just launched into a retelling of my daring rescue from my previous mission when the captain came on announcing that we would be jumping to the next system in an hour. Sadly, I bid farewell to my sexy shipmate, and I went to get my blade ready for the jump. Standard operating doctrine said that you had to be ready for anything when jumping into a new system, since due to the particulars of space travel each star system was fairly isolated. FTL ships are the most common form of space travel and are giant ships that range from the size of cities to the size of small countries, and were usually built from converted asteroids. A FTL ship's average flight time is between 6 months to a year depending on the distance. Because of the long travel time, they had to make sure they were properly stocked for the journey. There are also messenger drones that go about twice as fast as an FTL ship, but they are unreliable because they are unmanned and still kinda pricey because the parts to make the quantum field that makes a FTL engine work require rare minerals and are hard to make. Also, you don't know if the message arrived unless they send a reply, which they may or may not do. Jump ships are much faster, being that they are almost instant and could get you anywhere that a jump beacon is set up. That was the problem. The jump beacons has to be there first to jump there, so we still needed FTL ships. This is why the Empire still used so many FTL ships, and FTL can haul way more stuff. A small jump ship is about 200 feet long and a small FTL ship is about 2 miles long, and the largest can be much bigger. Jump ships also required awakened people to run them, star knights or star knots, and jumping a whole ship puts a lot of strain on people. So in peacetime, most would only jump once a month to give their pilots' bodies time to fully recover between jumps. This results in that most of the governments of the outer fringe planets are given a lot of freedom in exchange for keeping the planet safe, people happy, and keeping the jump beacons up and running, since it could be months or years between visits from the rest of the Empire. This means the first sign the Empire might see that a system has revolted is an ambush waiting at the jump beacon. Of course, the rebels might just destroy the beacon, in which case they would have years before the Empire got around to sending an FTL ship. Most rebellions, though, think they are the new big cheese and start their open rebellion with a bang. Sadly, this is what happened to us. I was in my launch bay on the ship, hooked up but not in combat sleep, since all the planets on this tour were safe according to the briefing. Waiting in my blade, I got so bored I even triggered a flashback to find out about the planet we are heading to. The planet of Nightfall is a fairly prosperous world on the outer rim of the human empire. Nightfall is poised to be the next stepping stone for the next wave of human expansion, as the humans of the human empire keep pushing ever outward, bringing more planets into the human empire. We really need to come up with a better name for our government. Nightfall is ruled by King Werner Blackstar, his daughter Princess Helen, and a council of hereditary landed nobles. I'm even going over the planet's manufacturing capacity and local mineral resources to stave off boredom. Contact is screamed at me from the speakers in a very unprofessional way. I had barely dropped into combat sleep when my blade is flung out into space by the launching rails. I quickly checked the sensor info being fed to my brain. In a normal jump to a jump point, there should be 17 contacts, a jump beacon, and the 16 marker pylons. The jump beacon is a small space station holding the resonance jump crystal and 16 marker beacons spaced around it, marking out the boundary of the arrival space. Since we were in space, the markers were 1,000 miles apart, but they told the locals to not park anything in that space, since when a ship jumps in, it removes everything in the space it jumps to and sends it to the jump realm. What we saw when we transitioned is over 100 small objects about the size of a large hover truck floating in space in a sphere around the jump beacon. By the time I had recovered from the shock, they had all kicked on their engines and started blasting towards us. Unmanned drones, Bookworm shouted as he shot towards the nearest drone, opening up with his blade's twin plasma repeaters and augmenting it with force blasts from his Starblade's force crystals. This quickly took out about a dozen of the drones, but they were too close and moving too fast. I added my firepower as well from my plasma cannon and PPC, blasting away a dozen more before they closed in. "Everyone emergency jump now," Bookworm barked as the drones closed in. I wanted to object. I wanted to say that the ship couldn't be ready for another jump so fast, but there was no time. I just had to hope the shields of the ship would hold. So calling on my powers, I looked straight ahead and jumped thousands of miles straight forward. With trepidation, I turned myself around and focused my sensors back on the place I had just left. One of the peculiarities of jump travel in space is that you can see the past by jumping farther and faster than the light travels. This allows you to look back at the old light flying past you to see what occurred in the past. In this case, I was able to watch the horrible past unfold after it had already happened. I could see the beacon surrounded by over 100 drones that were already in place waiting there. First we arrived, our ship flashing into existence about 100 yards away from the marker beacon. Then the drones all lit their engines as one and raced towards our ship. I saw our desperate battle and cowardly flight. Then every drone detonated as one. Over 50 nuclear fireballs exploded within meters of our ship. The shields that we awakened humans can make are incredibly strong. They can withstand impact from deep space objects, can deflect streams of plasma shots, lasers, grazers, radiation beams, or lots of conventional missiles. They can even shrug off a nuke or two depending on the power. 50 point-blank high-yield nukes is too much for even one of the Empire's finest. I stared in shock as the ship I had traveled in was decimated in an instant. I had faced death before, I've killed and had even had to execute a criminal, in cold blood once as part of my training, but this was a whole ship full of my comrades gone in an instant, and what was worse, I had been there, I had fought and hadn't been able to do anything.